Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie and today I'm going to be showing you Mooncat's newest collection called Remedy. This is a massive 9-piece collection inspired by Michelle's childhood in Taiwan. It features 5 thermal polishes and 4 shimmers. As always, I will save more of my thoughts for the end of the video after some comparisons and even some recreation attempts, but for now, let's just get into the swatches. The first polish and first thermal we have in the collection is Sakura's Serenade, which is a pink thermal filled with a blue shimmer that transitions between a hot pink when cold as seen here and in the bottle to a lighter shade of pink when warm. This one had a really beautiful formula. It was incredibly pigmented, very full coverage, super even as well. It is just a touch sheer, but I got this fully opaque for me in 2 coats, and it should come as no surprise that I really loved this shade. I mean, I'm a certified pink lover, especially when it has a blue shimmer. This is just so beautiful, and here it is after a couple of minutes where it's fully warmed up and I feel like you can't really see any nail line. Next we have Flying Nimbus, which is another thermal that transitions from a sky blue when cold as seen here and in the bottle to white when it's warm. This one again had such a beautiful, flawless kind of formula. I found it so pigmented, so creamy, but still so incredibly buttery smooth and easy to paint with. It didn't feel too thick or chalky. So I was really impressed with the coverage on this one on the first coat alone, and this built up to be perfectly opaque in 2 coats, which I thought was really impressive considering the warm state being the color white. It would just be a little bit more streaky or thin, but I thought it looked great. Here it is after a few more minutes where it's more fully transitioned. Next we have Melonberry, which is another thermal. This one transitions from a shade of lilac purple when cold as seen here to a soft shade of pink when warm. Similar to the last shade, the formula on this one was super creamy but still buttery smooth. It was just really impressive to work with. Just one of those polishes that's very satisfying to paint with, if you know what I mean. And yeah, I also really enjoyed the transition colors between this one. I mean, pink and purple are just so pretty together, and this specifically reminded me of those old like Trix yogurts, so I just thought it was really cute and nostalgic. Next up we have Murraya's Melody, which is a semi-sheer pastel yellow filled with color-shifting yellow to green shimmer. I feel like there's not much more I can say about the description. It's very accurate. The formula was also just really smooth and buttery. It provided really great even coverage on the first coat. It is just a little bit sheer, which is expected for a shimmery yellow. The shimmer is really strong though, so it just gives this beautiful kind of glow. But again, this is a semi-sheer kind of shade, so even with 3 coats, you are still going to see a hint of visible nail line. I feel like this almost is a pearlescent kind of shade, so I would just be careful of your brush strokes as well. Up next we have Jump Jump Bug, which is a green thermal that transitions from a medium jade green when cold, as seen here and in the bottle, to a lighter shade of celadon green when warm. This one had the same super creamy and pigmented, buttery smooth formula as the other thermal so far. So as you can see, I got really great coverage on the first coat, and it was fully opaque in just 2. As far as the color description goes, I don't know if I would agree with the shades of green that this is. The cold state to me leans like a dusty or muted teal almost, and the lighter shade is more of a yellowy green. Next we have Ribbit Ribbit, which is a vibrant pastel green filled with a light blue shimmer. This is another favorite from this collection. Not that it's especially unique, of course, but I just really loved this shade of green. It also had a super beautiful formula, again, that was just so easy to apply and work with. It provided really great coverage. I would say I got this opaque enough for me on 2 coats, where the nail line is definitely very obscured, but if you look close enough, you might be able to see a hint of it, but I don't think 3 coats is necessary unless your nails are a lot longer. The shimmer in this is definitely a little bit more on the subtle side. It's not super glowy. The last thermal we have is Koi Whiskers, which is a coral to yellow thermal filled with a soft pink shimmer. So this is the other thermal aside from Sakura Serenade that has a shimmer, but I found that this one was more creamy, similar to the other thermals that didn't have a shimmer. So again, it was just very full coverage, super pigmented and easy to work with, and fully opaque in 2 coats. This is another one I really adored. I just love this color combination. It reminds me of summer sunsets or even the tropical drink or something. It is just so incredibly pretty. The next polish is Dewpearls, and this is an icy blue filled with a color shifting purple to pink shimmer. This is definitely another super sheer polish similar to Murraya's Melody, but again, it still had a super flawless formula, just very even coverage, really easy to paint with and apply. I think it builds up beautifully in 2 coats, though you are gonna see some nail line, and even with 3 coats, it's still visible, but I think it's just so pretty. I love the icy blue color. It just has such a light and whimsical or ethereal kind of feel, which I'm personally a big fan of. Even though this one is described as having a purple to pink shifting shimmer, I would say that it's more like aqua blue head on, which you can see here, that then shifts to purple and pink in more extreme lighting. I think this shimmer is a lot more glowy too. And rounding out the collection, we have Momo Yuyake, which I'm so sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, but this is a vibrant coral pink filled with a color shifting peach to pink to orange shimmer. As expected, this had the same formula as the other shimmers in the collection. I would say this is maybe more similar to Murraya's Melody, where it's like a little bit more on the pearlescent side, so you might want to be careful with your brush strokes and try to get them as straight as possible, but it does have a super smooth, easy to work with formula, very even coverage, just a little bit on the sheer side where you're going to see some visible nail line on 2 coats, but it's not offensive. This one also has a beautiful color shift in extreme light, going to that peachy golden color. And here is the collage of my thumb swatches. I'm so sorry I didn't have time to do full hand swatches for all of these, but hopefully you can still enjoy how pretty they all look together. I have the 4 shimmers on top and the thermals on the bottom, kind of in a rainbow order just because I thought it looked nice. Now moving on to comparisons, we're starting with Sakura's Serenade, and I first wanted to see this next to Mooncat's Merkitten, which is another hot pink with a bright blue shimmer. I feel like they look like they could be so similar just in the bottles alone, but aside from Merkitten having a dainty hollow sparkle, the shade of pink is also a bit more blue toned and a little bit darker too. I actually do have a couple of pink thermals that I could compare it to, the first one being Holo Deeply Superficial from their anniversary collection last year, as well as Cirque's La Vie en Rose, which is an older, do-good kind of polish. Both of those do transition from a light to hot pink, but they're much cooler toned, and I think my Cirque is starting to fade. Moving on to Flying Nimbus, I wanted to first show it next to a couple of blue creams, starting with Mooncat's Sinking Feeling and Holo Too Good to Be Blue. I would say both of those are a little bit more true like sky blues. There's this certain powdery element to Flying Nimbus, which immediately reminded me of Color Department's Forget Me Not, which I think is much closer to that like tone of blue, being a little bit dusty, but it's just a few shades too dark. As I mentioned, I did want to try to recreate some of these thermals by doing gradients. So here I'm using Sinking Feeling and White Rabbit, which are just a sky blue and white. I didn't have the smoothest blend, but you can more or less recreate the vibe. Next for Melonberry, I'm showing this next to Sweet Nightmare and Holo Peri-Social, both of which are these periwinkle kind of shades. I thought they looked really similar in the bottle, but on the nail, I think there's this certain dustiness to Melonberry. I feel like it also looked a little bit warm toned, so I thought maybe it would be more similar to Holo Wild Child, but I was way off. That is just too muted and dusty. And for the warm state, I have it next to Euphoric from Mooncat and Holo Taco's Pinky Swear, which hopefully you can tell is just way off in its tone of pink, but Euphoric is actually really close. So I figured to try and recreate Melonberry, I can do a gradient with Euphoric and Sweet Nightmare. Again, not my smoothest blend, but I would say that this is a pretty close enough dupe. Then for Murraya's Melody, I of course have to show this next to Demeter's Harvest, which is Mooncat's other shimmery yellow. That one is a little bit bolder in its color though, it's not quite as pastel. So I thought to try to recreate it, I could use a pastel jelly like Cirque's Go Away, topped with Mooncat's Pixiestick, which is a green shimmer in a very sheer white milky base. It's not an exact dupe in my opinion, but definitely close enough, and hopefully you can tell that Demeter's Harvest is just a lot deeper, so Murraya's Melody is like the younger sister. Lastly, I did also want to compare this next to Witch Hazel from the Fallen collection. That one has a strong gold shimmer, but it's in more of a warm, peachy sort of base. So I personally wouldn't call these dupes, even though they, again, do have a strong yellow color. You just see a little bit of that green tinge in Murraya's Melody. Next for Jump Jump Bug, I thought it was kind of like the in-between shade of Paradise Found and Neverland. Neverland is like a typical minty green, while Paradise Found is more of that like bright seafoam sort of color, so hopefully you can tell that it's a lot more vibrant and even more blue leaning, so you can see that jade color in Jump Jump Bug, and then the warm state again is more of that yellowy green. I did also want to show Jump Jump Bug next to Devil's Ivy and Love's Labyrinth. Even though they are completely different finishes, I just thought they were a little bit closer in terms of that like bluish green color. And I figured I could also show it next to Holo Taco's Time After Time and Touch Grass, both from the Cottagecore collection. They're not exact dupes, but I just feel like they are a little bit closer in terms of having that like dusty green color with like a blue undertone. And then for the warm state, I thought it was maybe closer to something like Matcha Maker, having that like yellowy green color. So I used that in my recreation attempt in a gradient with Touch Grass, but that just was a little too dark. Moving on to Ribbit Ribbit, I wanted to quickly show this next to My Bugs from the Nightmare Before Christmas collab, as well as Apple of My Eye, which was a dearly departed shade from a few years ago. These are two shimmery greens, but the base colors are more yellow leaning, not to mention the shimmers are different colors. So for a closer color comparison, I have Cirque's Mermaid Grotto, which is a green with a blue shimmer. That one's just a little bit more muted, like just a touch less vibrant as far as the green base goes, and it's also a little bit more sheer, but I feel like they do have the same blue shimmer, and I thought I could maybe recreate Ribbit Ribbit by using a blue shimmer over Neverland, but I feel like it wasn't that close. And then I remembered Dreamland Lacquer's Shake Your Shamrock, which was from Polish Pickup. That one is another super glowy blue shimmer in a green base, but hopefully you can tell that the green in Dreamland is neon. Though I did notice if you swatch them on one coat alone as seen here, I feel like they look the same, which I guess is expected when they're so sheer. But when you do that second coat, you can really see just how neon Dreamland is, and it's like a little deeper in color too, but these are definitely very similar shades. Then for Koi Whiskers, I was immediately reminded of Holo Taco's Rage Bait, which was their thermal from their anniversary collection last year. This one has a similar color description where it's described as being a coral in the cold state that transitions to a tangerine yellow in the warm state, but as you can see, mine is just like an orange, so it's already starting to fade a bit. Either way, Koi Whiskers is much more pastel, so I figured I could show it next to Mooncat's Lucid Dream and Acidic, but they were just entirely different, where Acidic is much more orange, Lucid Dream is more corally peach. And for my recreation attempt, I tried doing a gradient with Zoya Kay and Color Department's Peach Perfection, but it was still a bit too vibrant. Next for Dewpearls, I was immediately reminded of Sabertooth and Melting Clocks, which is a dearly departed shade. Both of these are shimmery blues, but they have a little bit more of a powdery, almost cornflower color. I think Dewpearls has a slightly brighter, like aqua cyan kind of shade to it. I also think it's a bit more sheer than these other two as well, so I thought maybe it would be a little bit more similar color-wise, at least, to Wish I Hadn't Cried So Much, even though that one is filled with flaky. And just for reference, here it is next to Earth to Gaia, which is more of like a seafoam green color. They might look similar on camera, but they're much more different in real life. I was also reminded of Linby's Frostlight, which is a previous polish pickup shade. I wouldn't call these dupes necessarily, but they are both really sheer, soft blues with vibrant shimmers, so, you know, it's maybe close enough. The Linby is a lot more sheer too. And lastly, for Momo Yuyake, I have the swatch stick for Stolen Ambrosia, which was recently retired. That one's a lot more orange and less pink in the base color especially, but in indirect light they almost look the same. And here it is next to the swatch stick of Fleur Sauvage from the Baroque collection earlier this year. That one's a little bit more of like a peachy orange base with like a pink to orange shifting shimmer, so these are a little bit less similar. And lastly, I have Holo Taco's Encryption Key, which is one of their light multi-chrome shades. I feel like these looked pretty similar in the bottle, but they are a lot more different on the nail. Holo Taco is just a lot deeper and more red in its color, while Mooncat is like that lighter pink, but they do both shift to that like peachy golden shade in more extreme lighting. So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons of Mooncat's Remedy collection. As always, I would love to know your thoughts on this release because I thought these were really pretty. Hopefully that shouldn't come as a surprise, especially if you know me and my tastes. I just love all things light and whimsical and romanticized, and I really love the inspiration behind this collection and think they did such a beautiful job executing it. This is only Mooncat's second collection of the year, and I definitely do prefer this over Baroque, so I don't know, I'm just a fan. But that being said, I cannot help but wince at the price point of these. In case you somehow missed it, Mooncat recently raised their prices, so these shimmers are going to be retailing for $17, while the thermals are now going to retail for $18. It's the thermal increase that is like especially painful, because if you haven't seen any of my videos before, I always mention this whenever I'm reviewing a thermal, that the unfortunate truth about this finish is that it has a shorter shelf life, so that means at some point it will stop transitioning. That can depend on a couple of things like where you live and, more importantly, how you store your polishes. For reference, I live in the Northeast and I store all of my polishes in Helmers. We have central air, and I have a couple of thermals that are a few years old and still transition, though they are noticeably weaker. Mooncat only just started releasing thermals last year, so it's kind of a little too early to tell. I did go back and swatch their 3 thermals so far, and they do still transition for me, though the shade Treachery in the blue is noticeably not as strong as it used to be, or at least the warmer color has definitely changed a little bit, but the other two seem to be more in line with the original swatch photos. So don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to like fearmonger by saying that they have a shorter shelf life, meaning that they're going to like all of a sudden stop transitioning after a few months. That is not the case. They should last a couple of years, but the point is that they will stop transitioning at some point. We just don't know when. I know people have also mentioned storing their thermals in like the fridge, which will help preserve them. That seems silly maybe, but honestly, if you are going to be investing almost $20 per thermal polish, I think I would recommend that too. I personally feel like thermals are most worth it to people who are just starting out their collection, because you're essentially getting like a 2-in-1 polish, or they're also really worth it to people who just go back and rewear the same shade over and over again. But I feel like the majority of us who especially have larger collections don't often rewear the same shade. So more often than not, thermals just will end up dying before we fully get to enjoy them. So I just want to point that that out there for anybody who is like interested in thermals. Just keep that in mind. Make sure that you actually are like using them and also storing them appropriately so that they last as long as possible. Obviously though, $18 is an insane price to pay for a thermal polish. And even Mooncat's price increase in general, I feel like has just sort of moved them into like a luxury brand now, or at least with luxury prices. I'm assuming tariffs are a large part of the price increase, but I don't know how justifiable it is to increase all of their polishes by $2. Obviously, we don't know the financials of Mooncat and how they run a business, but you know, ultimately we live in a capitalist world and that's gonna win profits over everything. I get it, but it just really freaking sucks because I really love Mooncat. I love Michelle's creative visions and how well they're executed into these like beautifully curated collections. A lot of the times they just feel like art and an extension of her, and I value that so much, especially as like a creative myself, but it just sucks how inaccessible that is now becoming. And I can only hope that at some point they will reduce their prices. I am not holding my breath for it, and that just, I don't know, it just sucks. Like there's not much else I can say about it. I think these are pretty. Not to say that these are like the most unique shades we've ever seen where like, you know, you can't dupe them or something. I know there are people out there who can still just like readily afford these, and that's great, you know, good for you. I'm glad you can enjoy them, but for everybody else, I feel you. So yeah, I don't know how else to end this video. I just feel so like bittersweet over it because I think the polishes are pretty, but they are so expensive. So hopefully you found my comparisons and even recreation attempts helpful. The best thing I think that I could recommend is just trying to do gradients yourself, especially if you do have shorter nails, because thermals are just going to be harder to like see the natural transition, but you can easily recreate the vibe with a little nail art. So yeah, I really hope that you found this helpful. I'm sorry to be a little rambly here at the end, but let me know any and all thoughts that you have down below so we can chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!